It's my privilege to welcome Delegate Ferrell Tata to This Week in Virginia. Delegate Tata is a 30-year plus resident of what's currently the 82nd House District in Virginia Beach. We'll talk a little bit later about what the district number is coming up. A long career in medical sales, but a current role in ministry, Christian music ministry, K-Love Radio. I'm looking forward to hearing that station. But one of the most significant things, not just the Florida State University graduation or the Sorensen Institute, but it's the fact that the Virginia Chamber of Commerce chose you as the Freshman Delegate of the Year, and you were one of 18. In communicating with Barry Duvall, he said, well, it was easy because you exemplified pro-business initiatives and support for business issues. And that's from Barry Duvall, president of the Virginia Chamber of Commerce. Well, in addition to that, we can talk some about your connection to the military and your family. But at this point, Elise Weissenberger, who is a senior at JMU studying political science, interning with us, is going to start the show by asking a couple of questions, and then we'll get going from there. So thank you very much, Delegate Tata, for being on with us.
Okay, I did have one question about a House bill that you are co-patroning. With so much controversy over guns, gun violence, and gun control, why do you believe it's important to pass HB 833, group violence intervention? It's currently pending. It was pushed to the current special session. It creates the Operation Ceasefire Grant Fund to be managed by the Attorney General. And it provides that the money in the fund should be used to implement violent crime reduction strategies, law enforcement training, equipment for law enforcement, and awards grants to organizations that are involved in group violence intervention efforts.
So some of these bills, and this may be one of them, some of these were when we are with our caucus members, and the patron of the bill will explain why, this is good or bad, or why we should support or why we shouldn't. And then, of course, we make up our own mind. And as I remember, this is such an emotional subject. This is an emotional subject. And if, just when you see anybody holding a gun, it means different things to different people. So I think one of the reasons for that bill and others like them are we've got to have a broad study and look and consideration of a lot of different options. And as Mr. Bailey mentioned, I'm in Christian media, so for me, a lot of times my more focus when I hear about a horrible shooting or a tragedy, my mind immediately goes to what happened in that person's life, growing up, the family. Was there a father in the home? Were they, just showing mental problems early on? And that's where I go. And so I think that bill was, let's do a broad look at this instead of just focusing on one aspect of it, because it's complicated. This is very complicated. Right. It's very emotional. And, and it's honestly, it's not even a Democrat, Republican, a conservative, liberal. It's a personal experience. What is, when you see a person with a gun, when you hear about a shooting, what does that do to you? And it's different for everyone. So I know we like to go and try to fix the problem, but some things like this are really complicated. So I think this bill was more like, let's gather some more information and make decisions based on that.
Right. Thank you. Moving to a bit lighter of a subject.
Talk about coming in guns blazing. Literally.
After doing a little bit of digging on your website, I saw that one of your key issues is supporting small businesses. So what does supporting small business look like for your district and as the Commonwealth as a whole?
Well, I love that question because I love that subject. And I'm going to start again personally, because a lot of times, we engage because of our personal experience. I'm one of 6 children, and my father was an Army chaplain. He was a minister. My mom was a school teacher. very traditional upbringing. And 4 of my 6 siblings are small business owners. So this is something,
Okay, wow.
that, I hear about all, even though I'm not a small business owner, I hear the challenges and I mean, the goods. There are so many great things about being a small business owner, and all my siblings are very entrepreneurial and very successful in what they do. But, I feel like as in government, we have to do whatever we can to support, encourage, help, assist, small businesses. I mean, our country is based on small businesses, even the big ones. Sam Walton, everyone knows Walmart. It started with one little store, a small business. So small business is the backbone of our society. And I've seen that through a lot of different things, whether it's, inflation, gas prices, COVID, you name it, who's in office. So many of these small businesses have to weather so many different variables. And so whatever I can do to, keep less regulation, let these, trust these entrepreneurs to do what they know how to do and provide the goods and services that we all use, we've got to support them. We've got to encourage them. We can't make it harder for them. And they're out there fighting every day. They're fighting every day, and they have so many things. They have to do payroll. They're worrying about their customer service. They have so many things. Like, let's make their life a little easier. So I am very supportive of anything with small business.
Going back to your military connections, both from a military spouse and then, as you mentioned, your father, I was interested in the bill that you, of course, all your bills, you did really well as a freshman delegate looking at the status of the bills that you introduced, but the one that has to do with the suicide prevention coordinator. And I don't know why that hadn't happened before, but maybe it took a freshman delegate to bring it in. Tell our viewers something about that bill.
Well, and that one was, again, very personal to me as well. We live in Virginia Beach, and we're the home of the East Coast Navy SEALs, the teams that are the even numbers, 2, 4, 6, and Special Ops. And, there is so much, PTSD is a real thing here, a real thing. And we see the evidence of it all the time. And again, in my day job, I'm probably more aware of a lot of that, just because I hear about it. I also go to a church where we have a minister. He's an Episcopal priest. And I'm going to sidebar on this a little bit because I just want to understand where I'm coming from. Like, this is really, but his name is Father Nigel Mumford, and he was in the Royal Marines, and he fought in the Northern Ireland War when he was in his 20s, and he was a Marine drill sergeant. And he was completely shot up. Several of his men died. And back then they called it shell shocked. So he was in the hospital for 2 weeks and couldn't speak. And he ultimately, through a series of a lot of things, really felt like he had a healing from God, a healing. And he then went into the ministry and became an Episcopal priest. And he has something called the Welcome Home Initiative, where he works with combat veterans. And even back from either some people, and he holds these weekends, and they're called the Welcome Home Initiative. And he'll have World War II, Korea, Vietnam, any combat veteran, even foreign wars, if they're happen to be here. And one of the things he does is he has the combat veterans hold up their trigger finger, and he prays over that. I mean, it's really powerful. So what I really loved about this bill is there are a lot of resources for suicide prevention, and unfortunately, with the way mental health is today, that is a continuing growth area. What I liked about this bill is that this coordinator is specifically for veterans, specifically for military family members, service members, veterans, and the like. So I just thought this is an area where we really have to help. And I'm hoping that in addition to counseling and medication, they'll also include faith-based, we need a lot of options to help these service members, a lot. So I'm so thankful that they created this position and funded it to actually focus specifically on this population.
Well, that's certainly a powerful initiative, and glad to see that it passed. Glad to see.
And that was full support. Nobody
Yes.
voted against that.
Right, right. Yeah, there were probably some senior legislators who were saying, "Why didn't we think of that?" But kudos for you and for your background that you described in getting that going. You have another bill on foster care, housing for persons between the ages of 18 and 21. And if I've looked at that correctly, I think it's still in a committee of conference. That
Well, it is in the budget. It came out of conference, it was voted on, and I can't imagine that, I think Governor Youngkin is going to let that one stay in. And it's really, it's a very specific, very small number of people that it will help. But what's so great about it is that it provides this extra safety net. First of all, nationwide in the nation, about 1 in 11 children will be in some kind of foster care. So it's very, very prevalent. And to me, the foster kids are the orphans of today. And so I feel like we have to, as moms and dads, in the community, we have to take care of these children. And in Virginia, we have some wonderful things that we offer for foster kids, but the aging out, when they turn 18 and they start to age out, there's a little bit of a breakdown. And a couple of years ago, they passed a bill that created the Fostering Futures, which is a wonderful, wonderful program. If the child signs up, that child will get help with housing, tuition in school if they want to go to school, job training. They get other different services, all the basically services that they need. But the caveat is they have to sign up. And they have to agree to a few things, and they're very minimal things to you and me. They're very minimal. You have to have a job, and it's something like 80 hours a month, like a minimal job. You have to be in touch with your caseworker. So they're minimal things. But the problem is, and the reality is, some of these kids are so traumatized and so broken and so just exhausted from their journey that they think, think about a regular 18-year-old, Elise, I don't know if you were like this, but you're like, as soon as I turn 18, like I'm,
right.
and I'm out of here, you're not going to tell me what to do anymore, typical things. But for these kids, like they're so ready to get out of the foster care system. So what was happening, they didn't sign up for Fostering Futures. Several of them ended up homeless. So what this bill does, it provides only housing for an additional 6 months, with the hope that they will sign up for Fostering Future and allow the system to keep helping them. So it's really just a safety net, about 400 in Virginia, 400 every year age out. So, and of that 400, 60% of them will sign up for Fostering Futures. So we're not talking about a big number. And that's why I was so thankful. I'm like, come on, guys, we gotta, let's provide this extra safety net. And they did.
Yes, that is great. I'm glad that it's in the budget too. That's the key part. Any other bills that you introduced that you'd want to comment on? Those were certainly two that really jumped out. There were other bills.
Well, there was another one, and this bill, and I don't remember the number. I think it might be HB 357. But this bill, again, going back to that aging out population of these kids. Okay, this is another thing you probably would never have thought about in Elise. I don't know if you know any foster kids that are at JMU, former foster kids, but some of these kids, they've aged out, but they're in Fostering Futures and they're getting help with their tuition and their books and all that. But there's one little teeny tiny problem. And that is when there's a break, whether it's a Christmas break or a summer break, you probably go home and stay with your parents, right? Well, these kids don't have a place to go. So What was happening during the breaks, they would go to a homeless shelter. So we were like, oh my gosh, come on, we can't do that. So, and this is where I was really, and it's still in the works, and I think it's going to happen. But this was a situation where I put the bill in to cover that expenses for them to stay and provide housing for them. But instead, we found resolution, we think, that does not require legislation and doesn't require any additional money. And that is, we went to the universities and we said, hey, you guys already stay open for your international kids. If there's a foster child that's here, can they go in with the international kids and can you house them during the break? And there's a wonderful man that works in appropriations, Tony Maggio, he's my hero. He kind of, when I discussed it with him, he kind of took it on himself to help me make that happen. And we were waiting to hear whatever happens with the budget, but he thinks that he can get that approved, which would be amazing, solve the problem, no legislation, no money, additional money.
Oh, that's a great example too, Delegate Tata, that some people don't realize that sometimes just putting a bill in and then finding other ways to solve the issue is even better than just getting a bill passed.
And I look forward to more of those, David. I got to be honest. That to me, it's like I do, being one of 6 kids and having 4 children, I've always kind of been a problem solver. And so that I love the thought of, can we fix some of these problems without doing it in alternative ways?
Right. Delegate Tata, I would compliment you for being Freshman Delegate of the Year by the Chamber, but it seems like many of the issues you have are not necessarily pro-business. They're pro-people business type issues. And I think that's a great combination to be for business, small and whatever, and also, have a heart for other important issues.
Right. Well, because think about a lot of these kids, a lot of these foster kids and a lot of these military people will either be starting their own business, working for businesses.
Right.
So, it's like, let's get them, undergirded, and then so they can go out and contribute to society and help, society. It's all.
Tell us something. Yes. Tell us something about your committees, because I'm sure you knew before you arrived and you learned over the session that most everything happens initially, at least in the committee, and you have some very important committees that you serve on. So talk a little bit about those.
Well, thank you for that. I do. I actually requested transportation and education. And my father-in-law, you may remember Coach Tata,
Yes.
General Assembly for 30 years and was just a fabulous person, but a former football coach, high school guidance counselor. And he not only was on education, but he chaired it before he retired. He was a chair. So, and again, he and my mother-in-law and my mom and 3 of my sister-in-laws are all educators. So obviously that's something really important to me. I was really concerned during the campaign and after COVID, kind of uncovering some of the deficiencies that these kids have experienced. And I just thought, wow, this is, if we don't get education right, we are in big trouble. And I don't even want to focus on, I know the controversy about some of the things that are being taught or not being taught. And I, wherever you land on that, one thing that is undeniable is that scores are lower. It was undeniable that they lowered the range to, to make the numbers look better, but they're not, or we're declining. And the other thing that is undeniable is this COVID, again, going back to mental health, because you can tell that it's important to me. These kids, story after story of these kids that were straight A students, loved going to school, were involved in extracurricular activities, and they were so depressed. It changed their whole countenance. They didn't want to go out. They were isolated, and we're supposed to be in community. As human beings, we need each other. We need to be together. And they were deprived of that. And they really, really suffered, not only the learning loss, which is huge, but also the emotional impact was just devastating. So, again, education was just a huge, huge area that I'm so interested in. And let me say, I don't have all the answers. I'm still gathering and learning what the problems are. But once I really get a grip on that, I think I'll be able to offer some other kind of solutions of how we can make it all better for everyone. And then transportation. I mean, we live, it's funny, if you live in Virginia Beach, Tidewater area, some call it a cul-de-sac and others call it a gateway. And I'm like the gateway camp. Like we have so much to offer here. And, with tourism is so big, the military, all that, if we don't get our transportation right, if we don't figure that out and make sure that that's a top priority, businesses aren't going to come here. People are going to leave. Our military, which is such a treasure for us, when they get out of the military, they're out of here. So we just have to make that a top priority. So I was so eager to be on that. And then the interesting thing about my third one is the communication and technology, which I didn't know much about. But again, it all ties together, worrying about these kids in the rural areas that are so far out without broadband and how especially during the COVID, like how did they learn without, everyone's like, oh, you just do online learning. Well, these kids don't have internet. So I was kind of happy to be assigned to that one as well. And I'm learning more about what the different challenges are there.
Well, maybe take you back to your Florida State years in a communications major, I believe. And I think that really is a great need in rural, particularly in rural areas of the Commonwealth.
Well, one of my legislative aides, she's a computer science major, so she's all about technology, and so I love having her on my team because she will help. She can help, determine what the needs are and how best to help. So, and this is all working together for the good.
I'm so glad you mentioned Coach, because people around the Capitol and people around the Commonwealth, not just in Virginia Beach, remember particularly his years of service here in the General Assembly. And it's got to be a great honor to be on the Education Committee and just remember that Coach chaired the committee.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought him up, and I know where I brought him up, but first of all, I was always super close with my father-in-law. I mean, he is my husband, his oldest son, is hilarious, like his dad. His dad was so funny, and my husband is funny. He got that. And and my husband knows this, there wasn't a day that passed when serving in the General Assembly that I did not think about my father-in-law. And I try to imagine what he would say or how he would react, or, I just was constantly trying to hear his voice. And in my office, first of all, when he started in 1984, the year my husband and I got married, he was number 100 and he had his license plate. So I had his number 100 license plate in my office. And my number was 99. So I was like, I started a little ahead of him, but I also had a little portion of my office that was sort of a, homage to him. But I was so nervous, because this is all brand new to me. And I was a little bit of a reluctant candidate anyway. So I was so nervous my first couple of days of the session. And we started on the 12th, and his birthday was January 27th. And I knew I had to speak on his behalf, but I was so nervous. But when I was preparing my remarks, I realized that 31 members of the current 100 did serve with him, and Democrat and Republican. And it was so heartwarming. After that, so many people came up to me, and even before that, as soon as people saw my name, people would just stop on my office and want to tell me a Coach story. And it just warmed my heart. I mean, you just can't make this up. So it was really, really special.
Well, let me ask you, with that connection to Coach, I'm sure you had a lot of ideas about what it was like serving in the General Assembly, but what, as you look back on your now soon ending first term, what was your biggest surprise? What?
I will tell you my biggest surprise. And I will also tell you candidly, as close as I was with my father-in-law and as much as I saw what he did, you know how parents are, Elise, did you know what your dad and mom did day in and day out? I really didn't know a lot about what he did. I mean, believe me, that was one of the first things I said to my husband. I go, why didn't I ask your dad like what he was doing on a daily basis? So I was like, I went in there really not knowing much of anything. And but one thing you have perceptions of what you think happens. So I think my biggest surprise was how much you actually work together with the other side. Because all you hear, and at least this is a good lesson for you, when you only hear the news, I don't care whether you watch CNN or Fox, either way, you're going to hear that like they hate each other and they don't work together.
Right.
And that is not how it is. It really isn't. 85 to 90% of what we do is bipartisan. The majority of my bills had bipartisan support, 100%. So, the majority of what we do, and even like in the, this was shocking to me, but on the floor, they stand up in the point of personal privilege. You get to say when everything, and people just, no offense, but they go on and on and on, whatever it is, they just like go on and on. And some of the things they said were so mean and like really accusatory and inflammatory. And I was like, gosh, this is so awkward. And then you'd go into the member lounge and it's like, hey, how you doing? Did you have a good weekend? And I'm like, wait, did that really just happen? Like you were just out there so, angry. And I realized, what really happens, and maybe that's what people hear about and that's what's reported, but the majority of what we do it together. We do it well together. And there's so much working together. And there's a lot of camaraderie and poking fun at each other. And the things we don't agree are really important. So I don't want to minimize that. It's very important. We have to stand our ground and they feel like they have to stand their ground. So it's important that you don't give in to everything. But the majority is you work together. And that really surprised me. But I was happy to see that. And I was happy to see that it's not because it's, whatever you think about the media. It's just the media is not reporting everything correctly.
Thank you so much for mentioning that, because that's one of the points I try to tell people all the time, and some of them kind of look at me and say, "Oh, I don't think that's true." But thank you. Now let me ask you another question that I've asked some of the other freshman delegates. If there was something about the process that you think could be changed for the good, have you run across anything that you think would be helpful if the whole process was better here at the Capitol?
That's actually a good question. I don't know that I'm ready for, again, I like to problem solve, but I don't know that I've gathered enough to really try to make it better. I mean, so far, what I have seen, I have just seen a real, and I'm the thing about my dad was an Army officer. So the structure, the rules, the order, the respect, all that to me is so important. And I like that. I like the guardrails. And, but as far as actually the process of how it goes, I don't know that I've seen anything that I could make it better or it would make it smoother. I think maybe as I go along, I will start to see things like that and maybe even have suggestions. But I just feel like the way they do it is so well run. Even things like the committee meeting. I mean, I guess a little thing would be there are so many committee meetings on top of each other. The time management aspect is really stressful. I mean, I was like, wait, I'm supposed to be in 3 different places at the same time. Like, how am I going to do that? But I just don't know. You're cramming so much in a short period of time. I don't know that there's a lot of other things you can do to address that. But I don't know. I think they fine-tuned it and it's pretty well run.
Well, thanks for that. Before we would end, I said at the beginning I was going to ask you about your district that you will run in the next election. How does it change geographically, and what's its new number?
Well, it's easy to remember. Well, at least you won't remember this, but David, you might remember Get Smart. Remember Agent 99?
Yes.
It's 99, so I'm now Agent 99. But you can look that up, Lisa. It's on YouTube, I'm sure. But my district actually didn't. I'm so thankful my district really did not change that much. I actually lost a little of the part that was fine to lose, and I gained a part that I really wanted. So that was good too. But I'm really, really grieving the thought, and whether it's Republican or Democrat, just that they're put in the same district with their colleagues, that just bums me out because, I look around and I really like and respect everyone so much. And I hate the thought that they're going to have to now run against each other. So I'm so thankful, really, really thankful that didn't happen to me. Mine is pretty much in place. So here we go.
Well, Delegate Tata, we thank you so much for being on This Week in Virginia.